Hello, welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection of humans and technology. My name is Guthrie. I'm here with Susan. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Guthrie.
And we have kind of an interesting podcast for you today. It's going to be probably end up being a little shorter, a little more theoretical than we have in the past. And
we're chasing them away now.
Oh, don't run away. It'll still be fun. And it's because of a couple things. First, mainly, we just released our new certificate program called the Brain and Behavioral Science Certificate.
Yay!
Susan, would you like to just briefly give like a 5-second synopsis of what that entails?
It's a full PhD program in an online course format that'll take you like maybe a couple weeks.
I'm not.
It's everything I know about psychology and behavioral science and brain science in one concise place.
This is not true.
It is.
No. This is a lot of what you know.
Okay.
You definitely know way more.
It was very fun to put together. I think it's great stuff. But, I love this stuff. I love the brain and behavioral science. So I am definitely, I'm biased.
So in the same vein, recently in the last couple of days, I've started to do a bunch of work, and I'm not going to tell people what it is because I don't want anyone else taking my idea. But I've been doing a lot of research.
Then how are you going to explain it?
Well, I'm just saying I've been doing a lot of research in. But I'm not going to tell
what
people
you're gonna
why
do
I've been
with
doing
the research. Okay.
But I've been doing a lot of research into behavioral economics. And so the hot new fields these days, and one of the reasons we did the BBS cert now was one, because we wanted to, and it's been on our list for forever. And two, because we have this, the behavioral side of things is heating up as well. And because Susan's a psychologist and I am the economist, there are behavioral sides to both of this. So Susan, did you want to, we should first describe some terms and why things are so big. So I don't know if people out there have heard of what's called, would you call it behavioral psychology? A lot of this is kind of semantics, it's kind of like how define your terms, right? But what would you call that?
You mean like what I do and what the course we just did is based on and stuff?
Well, yeah. I mean, what you would call, so if I talked to you and said, hey, tell me something about behavioral psychology, what does that mean to you?
Well, I used to call that's a good question.
That's why, because at a certain point it's just about terms, but this is, it's really kind of a broader, all-encompassing term for what's popular these days.
Well, behavioral science is very popular, and I used to use behavioral science and behavioral psychology kind of interchangeably, but I don't anymore. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that I think people have an idea, maybe this isn't true, but they have an idea that psychology is narrower than
that was difficult.
That was bad. Okay, it's more narrow than than behavioral science. So, psychology is about, one person doing one thing, and maybe behavioral science is about
well, when you say psychology too, I think a lot of people think psychiatrists.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Never. No, well, so, all right. Well,
yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, when people say, oh, psychology, people say, oh, yeah, that's what you learn to become like a psychiatrist.
Okay, well, then we have to clear up a bunch of things. So let's clear them all up quickly. All right? So first of all, a psychiatrist is a medical doctor that specializes in issues and disease that have to do with behavior. Depression and schizophrenia and anxiety and neuroses and all that stuff. A psychologist does not have a medical degree. A psychologist usually has like a PhD in something or maybe a master's in something, and usually psychology. And they also deal with, you know, people who need therapy or counseling, but they cannot prescribe any medication. And then a psychologist may also be doing lots of other things. For instance, I am not a therapist. I am not licensed to be a therapist. So, you know, I have a PhD in psychology, but that I don't do anything to do with therapy and counseling. So psychiatrists and psychologists are very different. Now, one of the reasons that the term behavioral psychology I thought was a problem was sometimes, especially for people who are in the field of psychology and have been in it for a while, behavioral psychology refers to a very specific type of psychological theory based on operant conditioning and B.F. Skinner.
So just to back up a little, this is in contrast to what I guess you would consider the Freudian school of
what?
Psychology. Because that's it was a response to that, was it not? In the
it was,
50s?
But yes. So, but now behavioral psychology, if we're talking about it referring to Skinner, operant conditioning, schedules of reinforcement, all about rewards, that whole thing is also in contrast to all other, you know, like there's so many different kinds of psychology theories, you know, actualization and cognitive behavior therapy. I mean, there's many different schools of psychology, and behavioral science. Behavioral psychology used to refer to Skinner and operant conditioning. So I didn't want to use that term because that is certainly not how I mean that term.
So I think a lot of the confusion when it comes to psychology is a understanding of the way psychology used to be. Psychology, and I'm gonna and when it gets time to economics, I'm gonna make the same point. A lot of it before was more philosophy, right? You have the Freudian, well, it's all about your mother. Oh,
there was a lot of it. William James, Stream of Consciousness. Yeah. That's because
and
it makes it wasn't a social science.
Yeah.
At that point,
we're
talking about
it was philosophy. You sat around and you thought about the brain.
Late 1800s, early 1900s, yes.
And then it turns out that we started actually doing research on the brain. And
not even the brain, just research on behavior.
Sure, on behavior. And so generally, behavioral science is much closer to the very scientific academic side of things. I guess academic's the wrong word, but certainly the more medical, the more research oriented, and less the philosophical, the kind of musings on the id and the psyche.
It definitely became more scientific.
Much more about lab rats.
Well, no, not just lab rats, because that's what everyone said Skinner did. It encompassed studying social psychologies, interactions between people, motivation, what motivates people. So it became broader, and it definitely became based in science, where there would be experiments that you could run to look at human behavior.
Look at this. Decades of being angry at people being confused about what your
it was
the
terrible.
Field you loved is, and you're finally be able to get it off your chest. Is this therapeutic? Is this
yes, it is. I'd like to schedule another session and discuss it some more. No, every field has these little fights that are big fights.
Right, sure. And then there's what the public perception is, which is...
Well, okay. All right.
And I, as an economist, deal with this all the time as well, because there's so much confusion about what economics is, and it's... Anyways. But so the point is that you had this small field of behavioral psychology.
Yes.
And as we've moved more,
you're talking about the one based on Skinner, or later when it was bigger, but it was...
Well, that's what I was saying. It started based on Skinner, and then it started getting bigger because with the advent of MRI machines and all this, the tools at your disposal, what really became, why humans kind of do the things they do, which, I mean, surprise, surprise, does this sound like any of the work we've ever done? Maybe. Right? It kind of became this bigger, all-encompassing tent for behavior. And that's behavior that's based on research and observation.
And I think the other reason, I'm going to say that one of the other reasons why the term behavioral science became, well, actually, I think there are two reasons perhaps why it became more popular to use that term, and also because it just became more popular. So a larger group of people became interested in the science of behavior. For instance, marketing people. I mean, advertising people.
Sociology, economics.
They've always used these, ideas, but they really became, and tech, right, and design became very interested in. Okay, wait a minute. What is it we really know scientifically about how people behave? You can see why that would be useful in, marketing and design and a lot of other fields. So
that's right, everyone. Hire us.
Again, I'm biased.
Right.
I think that knowing about the science of why people do or don't do things is useful in many fields. And there's a whole body of science out there about it.
So
great fun.
Yeah. So basically, and like I said, we now, as the field has exploded, and we'll get to why in just a little bit, it encompasses so much more than just psychology, right? So behavioral psychology is the small subset of behavioral science, which is sociology and economics and all
neuroscience,
all these other things all put together.
Yep.
So the field, really, who I consider to be the godfather of the field
of behavioral science,
is really Daniel Kahneman.
Well, I love Daniel Kahneman.
The more and more and more and more and more I read, in anyone in the field, okay, who does anything about anything in the field, cites him. And was it Topolsky? Tversky, sorry.
Tversky.
Yes, Tversky. They basically published all their papers together. So Kahneman, I think, ends up becoming more popular because he's the one who wrote the book that everyone read.
He wrote the book, Thinking Fast and Slow. And also, Tversky also passed away. And I'm not going to say several years ago, but also not real recently. And Kahneman carried on the work. So I think that's maybe the other reason Kahneman's perhaps more well-known in general circles. He wrote the book.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, and the book was based on their research together,
Yes.
So
correct.
So in my head, the work they did is awesome. It's really cool stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Specifically, so like,
and they did a lot of it.
They did a lot of it. So the most cited paper, by the way, in behavioral science, behavioral economics, The Framing of Decisions and the Psychology of Choice, which came out in 1981.
Oh, really?
That was the most cited paper. Yep. And it poses the super, super, super famous question, which is becoming more and more famous. Imagine that the U.S. is preparing for the outbreak of an unusual Asian disease, which is expected to kill 600 people. 2 alternative programs to combat the disease have been proposed. Okay?
Yeah.
If Program A is adopted, 200 people will be saved.
Okay.
If Program B is adopted, there's a 1/3 probability that 600 people will be saved, and a 2/3 probability that no one will be saved.
Ooh,
which of the 2
bad.
programs would you favor? Okay? That's question 1.
All right, what are my choices again?
Program A, 200 people guaranteed to be saved.
Program A, 200 people are going to be saved.
Program B, 1/3 probability, 600 people will be saved, everyone, and a 2/3 probability, no one will be saved, everyone dies.
Well, I would pick A.
Right. And you, are, of course, are in the majority. All right?
Really? Everyone picks A?
72%
Okay.
of the people picked A.
That's a lot.
And this is why. So you have behavioral science comboed with theory, comboed with empirical data. Right?
Okay.
So this is why Kahneman was so really kind of brought everything together. Okay?
All right. Well, so is A the right answer?
There is no right answer. This is
A the best answer?
A was the most popular answer. But because most people will save the 200 people.
Yeah.
Even though mathematically, right, if there's a 1/3 probability to save 600,
it's only 1/3 though.
That's 200 people, right? So like from a probability standpoint, the options are the same. So that's interesting that more people pick the for sure thing.
The options are the same?
Well, yeah, 600.
In one, you're saving 200 people.
In the other group, you're saving 200 people. It's probability. I'm an economist, so they are the same.
So you're saying, yeah, but people don't see it that way, right?
Of course they don't see it that way.
They hear the 200 versus the 200 for sure versus everyone might die.
I mean, think of it this way, right? If I say we're going to play a game, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to flip a coin. Mm-hmm. If it's heads, I give you $1. Mm-hmm. If it's tails, I won't give you anything, right?
Okay.
What's the value of a coin flip to you? It's 50 cents, right? Because every other time you get $1, right?
If I play more than once.
Well, yes, yeah, but that's the right. So to you, your value of flipping the coin is 50 cents, for example.
Well,
if you look at it this way, how many people will be saved? Well, if there's a 1/3 chance that 600 people get saved, 1/3 times 600 is 200 people. Statistically, they are the same.
But people don't think that way.
People don't think that way. But then here was the second question. Okay? Same case. There's an outbreak of a usual Asian disease which is expected to kill 600 people.
Yeah.
2 alternative programs to combat the disease have been proposed. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
If program C is adopted, 400 people will die. If program D is adopted, there is a 1/3 probability that no one will die, and a 2/3 probability that 600 people will die. Which of the 2 programs would you favor?
Okay. We summarize it again. In
Program
C,
400 people will for sure die.
400 people are going to die.
Program D, 1/3 probability no one dies.
Oh.
2/3 probability that everyone dies. Which of the 2 programs would you favor?
Well, I don't want everyone to die. So I would pick C.
You would pick C. You would be in the minority.
In that case, I'm in the minority.
You're in the minority. 78% of the people picked D. 22% people adopted. Now, you, of course, made the easy leap. If you look at A, B, C, and D, they're exactly the same. In program
Wait a minute,
A,
what's the same?
So, if program A, 200 people will be saved, right?
Is the same as what?
400 people will die. It's the exact same. If you're going to save 200, it means you're killing 400. So program C is literally exactly the same as program A.
Did I vote for A or did I vote for B?
You voted for A.
I'm consistent.
You are consistent. Most people are not. And I have asked a number of my friends this, and they followed the majority rule in a lot of them. So they
voted for A and D.
Yes. If program D is adopted, there's a 1/3 probability no one will die. 2/3 probability 600 people will die. So people, and that's the same as before, right? If there's a 1/3 probability that 600 people will be saved, and a 2/3 probability that no one will be saved. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but you're an economist, so you understand probability.
No, no. I totally understand why most people pick that.
Why?
Well, what do you mean why?
Why?
Well, because it's about framing and probability, and you have to jump through the hurdles. And I mean, I don't need. I mean, you can. That's a whole podcast done.
You don't think it's just because people don't like the term probability is too mathematical?
No, because that's why. Then why did so? But so then why in between A and B, people picked the one that didn't have the probability.
All right. So what does Kahneman say about all this?
It's about framing. It's about
the way you describe
it's about
it.
the way you. So the big point is A is statistically equal to B, and C is statistically equal to D. A and B are C and D are just the inverses of A and B, right?
Right,
200 people will be saved.
But people don't. They change their mind based on how
They
it's
change their mind based on how it's.
It's
so
framed.
even though the percentages are the same and the chances are the same, right? If you frame it as 400 people will die, people go, oh, that's a lot of people. I don't want 400 people to die.
But I have to ask, why is this research important?
So at least it depends what field you're in, right? So at least in the field of economics, for forever and forever and forever and forever, all the econ papers start with, we assume that people are rational actors, right? And we'll do based on a given utility, people will maximize their utility, right?
All right. Well, yeah. Now I have to, all right. So here's where
but hold on.
What?
Well, right here, they've just demonstrated that's not true because you have literally, mathematically, the same utility and different outcomes.
Well, of course. So what?
Well, this was a big deal in 1981.
Well, I understand that, but I have to say when the whole field of behavioral economics started to get big, right? Which was a shock for the field, which is what you're saying. He
won they both won Nobel prizes for this work.
Yeah, and so
among
for
other work that they did.
The rest of us who are in the field of psychology looked at the economists and said, duh, like what the heck? Why did you have, I remember reading, this must have been, it wasn't, I don't know, it was maybe mid 2000s, reading some, because I am not an economist and I don't know a lot about economics at all. But I was reading some stuff about behavioral economics and, started to understand that this was a relatively new thing and it was like a subset and it was kind of a shock to the whole field of economics. And I was like, are you guys crazy? Why would you have...
Can I just defend economics for
a
hot second?
Why would you have, in a moment, why would you have a field based on the idea that people make rational decisions? I just thought that was hilarious, and I thought it was really funny that the economists were now starting to say, wait, people aren't rational and logical and they're making decisions based on other factors. So those of us in psychology thought that was very cute.
So,
okay, now you can defend your field of economics.
So much in the same way. So when did Freud do his thing? Okay.
I don't know, in the 1920s, 30s.
Right.
40s maybe.
So when behavioral psychology started, when the science part of psychology started to take root in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
At that same time, it started taking root in economics. All before then, I consider economics to be purely philosophy.
Okay.
So if you think of Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, it's this philosophical thought arguments.
Okay.
Much in the same way that. Freud did it, right?
Thought experiments.
This means this. We have the id and the this, and therefore people do this.
Okay, but wait. But it took till the early 1980s.
I'm getting there. Hold on.
Okay.
So finally, in the 1950s, they started moving away from, people will work harder if they have, and they just from these like grand statements. And they started moving towards math.
Okay.
Combined with empirical evidence.
Okay.
Now, and I guess at this point, if we're going to move into economics, we should explain the difference between economics and psychology. And
go ahead, have fun.
And this was a brilliant thought of mine that I had last week.
Really?
So the thing about psychology that makes it easy is that every single brain is essentially the same. The place that recognizes faces, right? Everyone has an FFA. They all have a fusiform facial area. for except for I guess some people with like a brain disorder, and it identifies faces in you and me and in people on the street. Every human just has this.
Okay.
And there are certain things that depend on culture and depend on ethnicity and here or there. But for 95% of most of the stuff that has to do with how you breathe and the part that deals with, hearing sounds, and, it's all the same in every single human. And so you can figure out patterns of behavior generally. What economics is interested in is figuring out patterns of behavior specifically, because every person is different and each circumstance is different, and so you can't just like open up someone's brain and be like, oh yeah, this is the place where when they're confronted with Coca-Cola or Pepsi, they always choose Pepsi.
I don't know if I'm going to agree with you on this.
That's fine. Fair enough. You don't really have to. But the point is that when it comes to economics, it all depends, and to a certain extent, it depends. This is true in psychology as well, but it depends on factors, external factors. So I'm standing in the store.
I will buy that. I will buy that psychology is often very interested in general, are people like this or like that?
Right.
And, they understand that there's external factors that have an influence, and they may even want to be studying what those external factors are. But they are also intrinsically interested in, what's the thing we can generalize about all people.
And it makes sense because there's an answer, right? Because there's a hardwired brain physiology.
There might be. There isn't always. There might be.
Yes, but often there can be. So like you can find an answer, right? Oh, we found the part of the brain that where the synapse where when you make a decision it fires. Right? Like we found it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, so when it comes to economics, it's a much softer science. And so what you have to do is you develop an economic model, okay?
Which says if these factors are at play, then people will tend to do this?
Well, for each factor, you have a variable, right? Or a series of variables, right? So the simplest version, okay? So Kahneman basically came up with a theory of utility. And it basically says, how much of a gain am I going to get? Okay. Times how much. So if I'm trying to make a decision between two options, right?
Yeah.
Well, so each option you get basically a score. How much of a benefit am I going to receive? And how much do I value that benefit?
Okay.
Right? And you compare how much am I going to value the benefit and how much do I care versus the other option you're going to pick. And then you could say, hey, people are going to make this decision. And if you find something that's wrong, then your model is wrong. So in the this is the big general difference, is that it's really hard to do that, but it also means that as your models get better and more encompassing, they get more accurate. And you can figure out the nuances. When you start with simple behavior, the assumptions people were making, I mean, these are the economic models that won people Nobel Prizes 60 years ago, while they look really complicated and the math is impressive and the smart people took a lot of time, the models themselves are incredibly simple. So simple, right? They basically just say, what do I value more? And then they will always take that decision every time. That's it, right? That's as far as they got in like the 50s and 60s. Like
it took them a while to get there.
They invented the field. They invented the first theories about first economic models of anything, essentially, using math. So economics, in my view, is a really, really, really young field. And so people say, oh, economics sucks, or the economists never know what they're doing. Well, it's like, yeah. Like, imagine, okay, if you had invented surgery 50 years ago, okay, so you would be like a surgeon right now in like, I don't know, 1730. Okay, like medicine has had 400 years to get through a lot of the junk that it had to get through to become like pretty good. You know, you just got to give economics. You know, economics has just started.
Okay, we'll cut it some slack.
So that's, you know, yeah. So it's just so every time there's a model, and then people discover a flaw in the model, and then people come up with a better model that's more accurate, that explains more behavior. And then people discover a flaw in that, and they come up with a better model. And it just kind of, you kind of continue to become more accurate and more consistent with reality.
Well,
and this is, well, I'll cut to the chase. This is what Kahneman did. So Kahneman was a really big deal because he said, look, all these old classical theories, they're all crap. Like, yes, they work in a limited setting, but you're dealing with humans, and humans are imperfect creatures. And so you have to change how people value things and make it, as Kahneman would say, predictably, it's not his book, but, you know, so predictably irrational, or he used different phrases.
Which is Dan Ariely's book.
Yeah, it's Dan Ariely's book. So there, yeah, so it's not like it's irrational. It's just like a perceived rationality, you know, versus an objective rationality. Anyways, that paper came out in 1981. Yeah. And in fact, their first paper that created an economic theory, actually, that does a lot more about decisions and risk, came out in 1979.
Wow.
So in 1992, they came out with another paper completely updating their model, their economic model, in 1979. They said, there are all these problems with it. People have picked apart these problems. Great. We will come up with a new economic theory. And that was back in 1992. And I'm sure since then there's been lots of other people who have found problems and identified them, right? In the same way that, again, in the question I posed with the 200 people versus, you know, will live versus 400 will die, you get different answers. Now you have an economic model that can take those things into account.
So when Kahneman and Tversky were doing all this work, were they coming up with these mathematical formulas?
Absolutely. In fact, that's their claim to fame.
Because he doesn't talk about I mean, there's no mathematical formulas in his book.
Yeah, I know there's not in his book. That's why I went and I read the theories. So his big paper, Prospect Theory, an analysis of decision under risk by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, it came out in Econometra. It is, I mean, it's straight up. It's a mathematical theory, and the problems are just kind of icing on the cake. So yes, for example, this is a quote from the paper. An essential feature of the present theory is that carriers of value are changes in wealth or welfare rather than final states. This assumption is compatible with basic principles of perception and judgment. Our perceptual apparatus is attuned to the evaluation of changes or differences rather than to the evaluation of absolute magnitudes.
So he's saying, we tend to pay more attention to how much something has changed,
right,
rather than what it's some kind of absolute.
Right. Reference points are really, really, really important.
Well, and that's okay. So is that
right?
That's really interesting.
And so previous theories, they just added it all up, right? Well, if I'm getting $5 here and $100 here,
right,
$105 is worth more than just $104.
And, Kahneman's research, I know, showed, I mean, the parts I read without the mathematics, that if you perceive that there's been a significant change, that's going to be more important than the total change there might have been from beginning to end. right?
So he came up. So basically, I mean, this was this paper in '79. Obviously, things have changed a lot then. But what they did was their mathematical formula. Basically, you had you had it's a function that basically people value reducing losses more than increasing gains. That's the big thing, right? So if it's a loss function, right? If it's something where you're going to lose money,
yes,
people value reducing losses a lot,
right?
but they value increasing gains less. And so he created a mathematical model that corresponds to that, and that was like that's a really big deal, right? So let's say if I say, what are you willing to do to avoid losing $100?
Yeah.
Versus what are you willing to do to make $100?
Right.
People are just willing to do more to not lose $100.
Right.
And it's like, and to the previous establishment, right? Well, $100 is $100, right? What does it matter? People will do the same amount. Of course, that's not.
So can I ask you a question?
Whew, yeah.
If we're talking about the difference between behavioral science, or parentheses, behavioral psychology, and behavioral economics. Here's as you were saying that one of the ideas I came up with is, as an economist, you're interested in knowing that. You're interested in knowing that people, it's more important that people will not lose something than gain. And I talk about this, in all my stuff. I mean, in our new curriculum, there's a point in which I say fear of loss is more important than anticipation of gain, as more predictive of behavior. So I understand that. Now, as a psychologist, okay, I don't necessarily want to know the formula. I want to know why, right? So I want to know, and so I'm looking at the brain science and the old brain and the and trying to explain why that would be.
Right.
Do you think that's a difference between behavioral economics and behavioral science? In that behavioral economics just wants to make sure they got the formula and they understand the prediction, whereas the psychologist is like, I got to find out why this is true of people.
Right. Yep. So basically, the way the economist goes about things is, I want to make an economic theory. Okay, I want to make a formula that's accurate, and so therefore
you want to make a prediction.
Yeah, and it's really it's a universal model is what it is, right? So I can take any person.
Yeah.
And as long as I know the values or the relative kind of values that go in the respective variables, I could tell you with 100% certainty what they're going to do, and given any situation, as long as
these factors are present and
and as long as I have accurate variables, that's really powerful.
I just happened to be. I won't even go into why, but I just happened, like 2 days ago, I was looking at jobs for behavioral economists.
Yeah.
There are a lot of jobs for behavioral economists.
Hot right now.
And I think there's probably a lot more jobs for behavioral economists than there are for behavioral scientists with a psychology background. So I'm assuming that this idea of being able to predict and plug variables in and come up with numbers is, and it was interesting. It was across the board in many, many different kinds of industries that people want to be able to predict this.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's becoming a very hot field, but it all relies on your model being good and the assumptions in your model being good. And
So do you think these two fields play well together?
Sure. Because at the end of the day, it's all tied into trying to better predict human behavior. You know? And the humans are, it's tough because, humans are humans. There are things that are solid, but there are also a lot of variables involved. What you decide to eat for lunch, okay, is an incredibly complicated decision. Amazingly complicated. It has to do with what's currently available to you and how much money you have and where you are and what you normally eat for lunch and what kind of food you like and what you're feeling that day. And it's just like, if I came to you and said, make an economic model that could predict what any person in your county, Marathon County, will eat for lunch today, it's almost impossible. It's just incredibly difficult. And so, so when it comes to, but it can be really, really powerful if you could figure that out. So when it comes to that kind of stuff, you take a couple steps back and you try to answer simpler questions with less variables that you can wrap your head around. And when you take less variables and when you reduce your scope and you simplify things, you introduce a certain level of error. And this is the game economists play, is that you can't, it's too hard to get every variable correct. So we're going to do the best we can, and we'll then move from there.
All right, I have a question for you.
Yeah. But if you're trying to sell Pepsi, that could be really, 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 really important.
All right, here's a question. So, we just, as you mentioned, we just did this whole curriculum on brain and behavioral science because, and part of the reason we did that is I believe that many people, not just people who do research in brain science and behavioral science, can understand, what the latest research is telling us and can apply that in interesting ways to, their work or their personal life or whatever. Do you believe the same is true of behavioral economics? Because, it sounds like it's possibly more complicated.
Oh, it's definitely more complicated.
Yeah. So is this like an esoteric field that only, some people can even understand? But it must not be, because Kahneman took it and turned it into...
Yeah. If you can, in the same way, okay, that you don't, when you're explaining behavioral psychology to someone, you could tell them about the research.
Mm-hmm.
But I bet you don't get into, the actual, the data and controls.
I make decisions. Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah.
Right, and because it's too much and people just can't understand it, and if you're not familiar with it,
and it'll be boring. No, really, it can be kind of overwhelming.
And I think in the same capacity you can do that with economics.
Yeah.
Where if you can, like I said, I can make a graph, right, and show you that. So, for example, there's a graph that Kahneman made, which is a losses gains graph with value, right? And you can think of it as kind of on the losses side, it's a mountain that's getting steeper, if that makes sense, right? It starts slow and then it gets more steeper, which is basically that people are trying to reduce their losses as much as they can.
Yeah.
And then once you hit 0, after that, it becomes a gentle slope.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of levels off. That says, well, once you get gains, people want more gains, but eventually, it just kind of wears off.
Mm-hmm.
That is, 3 pages of axioms and theories and variables, and it's all in letters, and it's terrifying. But the concept is what's important. And you can use math to come up with very interesting concepts and implications.
Yeah.
So if you can take those and break them down, I think it's really important. Here's a it's especially relevant when it comes to game theory and stuff. Here's a simple game for you, okay?
Yeah.
there's well, let's see which one. Okay, we'll play this game. Which of the following options would you prefer?
Okay.
A sure win of $30,
Okay.
or an 80% chance to win $45.
The sure win of the $30.
You're with the majority there.
Just give me the $30 and I'll
Okay.
go have a nice dinner.
Let's make it better, okay?
Okay.
Would you take a sure win of $80
Mm-hmm.
or an 80% chance to win $100?
A sure win of 80
What about a sure win of $70?
versus what?
An 80% chance to win $100.
No, I want the 70.
What about 50? $50 right now, or you have an 8 in 10 chance to win $100.
I'll take the 8 and 10 chance.
Right? So there's a line somewhere, and that depends on the person and their tolerance for risk. Okay? Let me ask you another question. All right? Would you take a lottery ticket, which is a 1 in 1,000 chance of winning $5,000, or $5 right now?
The lottery ticket.
And you again would be in the majority. Most people take the lottery ticket. Mathematically, they're the same. Right? The lottery ticket is worth $5 because you have a 1 in 1,000 chance of winning $5,000. So if you, right? So you'd have to, you know what I'm saying? So like each ticket has
Well,
a
it's nice
probability
to
worth
know
$5.
I'm normal.
Well, of course you're normal. But here's the thing, right? And of course Kahneman took this and then he said, would you take a 1 in 1,000 chance to lose $5,000, or will you pay me $5 right now?
Oh. I don't know what I would do. I think I'd pay him the $5.
And you again would be in the majority. Most people would just pay $5, and that's of course why Kahneman won a Nobel Prize, because it's demonstrating how interesting humans are, right? You have the exact same thing. Well, we just made it negative, and now your behavior changes. But because again, people value reducing losses more than increasing gains. But the important part really is that you can use simple numbers and come up with little games to demonstrate your point without having to actually look at what the outcomes of the math will give you. Right?
Okay.
The math will give you these same things, but you could do it in a way that kind of makes sense. Now, of course, what's interesting is that, in this specific case, is that, people will take less money for a sure thing.
Yeah.
Right? Again, the one I gave you before, right? So let's just say, let's instead, right, we have the 80% chance, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a line somewhere that people will take they'll take the risk.
Yeah.
But it depends on each person, and if you're quite poor, you're always going to take, you're going to take the sure thing all the way down. And that's really interesting, and that's really important. And if you're doing marketing, or if you're doing all this other research stuff, or not research stuff, but businessy stuff, where you're trying to get people to purchase and make decisions and or interact with marketing. I mean, with a product, it all could be very, very interesting and important. So the thing is that it's getting really popular right about now.
All right. So to sum this up, okay.
Yeah.
If people are interested in this and want to learn more about behavioral economics, what would we recommend? Kahneman's book?
I would recommend PhD in econometrics. Pick up a econometrics textbook. Learn some fundamental theorems. You're going to need a broad level understanding of statistics before you start econometrics.
You're going to need a lot of math.
Programming skills are really important, especially if you can know Stata, which is a pretty popular program. $100,000 for a graduate level degree.
Just go read Kahneman for now. Although, I have to tell you, because he's
the godfather, and I think
he's really good. His book is great, but it's a big book, and sometimes I tell people to go read it, and they say things like, I couldn't get through it. So we may need, somebody may need to write the Kahneman Light.
Yeah. No.
Hey,
you think that's tough? You should read these. You should read some of these econ papers.
No, I'm not reading the econ papers. That's okay. The psychology papers are bad enough. I'm not. You read the econ papers. I'll read the psychology papers, and we'll meet in the middle.
I'm working on it. But yeah, so this is a really hot field. I'm personally glad that over the last 30 years, the big move in economics has been to add the human variable to a lot of their stuff, or to add, I guess, like the real life thing. So, for example, there were a couple of economists who did a bunch of work in transactional economics.
Yeah.
So the idea that so markets will always move to equilibrium.
Yeah.
That's Econ 101, which again I hate because they just teach like the basic philosophical stuff. They don't, anyways. It's a rant for another day. But what they also do, which is kind of interesting, is a couple economists got together and said, well, that doesn't happen in the real world. Why? And it's because, hey, let's just say all of a sudden, there are 2 gas stations in town, right? And one of them starts selling gas for 5 cents cheaper. Well, eventually the other gas station is going to lower their prices to match their price, right? At a certain, assuming their gas stations are identical. But it takes time to do, right? In the real world, the other person has to go out and see that more people are going to the other gas station, and then see that their prices are lower, right? And he's got to get the little ladder and go up there and change. So like in the real world, it takes time, and that's a very simple example. Imagine much more complicated examples like like bids for oil pipelines or something, right?
Yeah.
In that time it can take maybe months or even years for markets to equalize. And there's a time factor. And not only is there a time factor, there's a transaction factor. It costs money to change your prices, and it costs money to, it's called transactional costs, transactional utility. And so all these things are important in figuring out why sometimes, even though all markets do go to equilibrium, sometimes they don't, and not as fast as you'd want. And so people got Nobel Prizes for determining this stuff. And this is really the next progression of that, which is, well, humans do weird stuff and they value things differently, and these values have consequences, because economics is really about, human activity and how we interact with each other. So,
all right, so I have a challenge for you.
You
don't want a challenge?
Well, okay.
It's easy.
Oh, okay. Can I do it right now?
No.
Ugh.
I want you to come. On some of our future podcasts, I want you to come back with some of these little questions. I like the little questions,
Oh, yeah, sure. So the game theory stuff?
Yeah. Keep it coming, because I think that's interesting.
You want me to give you one more?
All right, and then we got to go.
Okay.
One more.
It's a simple game.
Go ahead.
There's 60 balls in an urn.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
And there are 2 urns next to each other.
Yeah.
They have some combination of red and yellow balls, and you have to decide which one to bet on. Now, you are trying to someone's going to reach in and they're going to pull out a ball. It's going to be either red or yellow. And you win money if it's red.
Okay.
And you lose money if it's yellow. So you're trying to get
I want red.
You want red balls, right? Now, in one urn, you know that there are 30 red balls and 30 yellow balls.
Yeah.
You don't know
what's in the other
what
one?
the distribution is in the other one.
Okay.
You have $5. Where do you bet?
Yeah. The one I know.
Yeah. And again, you're in the majority, right? People will bet on the one that has equal odds.
The thing they know.
Yeah. Even though, hey, there could be only
the
red balls in the other urn.
Right, but I don't know.
But you don't know that.
I don't like the uncertainty.
Here's the interesting part, okay?
What?
Same question, except on one urn, I could tell you there are 29 red balls and 31 yellow balls.
Okay.
So the odds aren't even in your favor,
Yeah.
right? Well, most people, they're
I
still
still want the other one. It's not that different.
Yeah, they still want the for sure odds.
Yeah.
And they'll go all the way down. A lot of them,
That's funny.
20, 40,
20%.
19, right? Yeah. Even though the odds
just because I know it.
Just because you know it. Exactly.
Yeah, we don't like things we don't know.
Exactly. So that's another little fun game.
It's all the old brain. Hey, this was interesting. Thanks for sharing all this stuff, and I'm glad we got to clear up, that I am not a psychiatrist. So that was it's really good that everyone know that.
Yeah.
And I cannot refill your prescription.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
All right, Guthrie, before we go.
Hey, everyone, go check out our new Brain and Behavioral Science certificate at courses.theteammovie.com.
And we should tell them that the first course in the curriculum is free.
And it's long, too.
Well, it's not that long, but they can learn a lot even just by taking the free one. So they should go check that out. And
it's 6. The whole certificate itself, 6 courses. Each course is like an hour of video and tons of exercises.
Yeah, more than an hour of video.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff.
Almost 2 hours of video.
2 hours of video. Yeah.
Quizzes and exercises. There's a course on decisions and a course on motivation and a course on social relationships.
Yep.
And a course on vision and perception. And what did I leave out? A course on thinking and memory. And then there's the intro course with the fundamentals, and that one is free. So check it out. As usual, please email us with any of your thoughts about podcasts or any ideas for future topics you'd like us to cover. And is that it, Guthrie?
Yeah, courses.theteamno.com. Susan, thanks so much, and we will talk to you hopefully next week.
Okay, now there's an urn, and it has, oh no, we're done. Okay, bye.
Bye.